Hey everyone, T Rob here with the Biz Pulse, and I've got an exciting show for you today. I've got Dan Nicholson with me, and he's got an incredible book called Rigging the Game that he's going to talk to us about. But Dan does a lot of different things, and I don't want to totally tell you everything he does because I want him to introduce himself. So, with that, I'm going to go ahead and pull Dan in. Hey,
Hey,
Dan.
hey, how you doing?
Good. Thank you for coming on the Biz Pulse. I'm excited to have you. So tell everybody who Dan is.
Well, first off, I'm fired up by the whole intro music and video, so that was fun.
Yeah, thanks, man.
So who am I? I am maybe like a lot of those people who are listening today. Cliche. I was a cliche kid growing up, scheming on business ideas, mostly bad ideas, but kind of been an entrepreneur at heart from almost from birth. Had to work through the fact that I was also a painfully shy kid. And whenever my parents are around and they hear me say painfully shy, they're like, painfully shy. They're like, add in a second pain. So I sort of had to work through that. Ultimately, went to business school, got a couple degrees, went down a very conventional path for a while before I reoriented myself. I was like, hey, what am I doing here? I'm completely miserable, and I'm ignoring the fact that I'm an entrepreneur at heart. So finally kind of took the dive full time into entrepreneurship, and then realized that I had to unlearn most of what I thought I knew. And the book that you referenced, Rigging the Game, is it's not a memoir, but it's sort of like a lot of personal stories weaved in about kind of unlearning what I thought I knew, and especially from business school to live the life that I wanted to live.
Right. Yeah, isn't that interesting, Dan? When you go to school and you get all these degrees and you come out and you go, what do I do now? It's like, I mean, I was the same way, so it's like, oh, well, I didn't really learn anything, I mean, like, how do I run a business? So,
right.
Yeah.
I don't regret. I know there's a lot of folks who are like, a degree, is it really worth it? I don't think I needed those 4 years to like come into myself and prove what I was capable of. And so to me, a lot of the college experience was less about what I learned, although I was certainly grade obsessed, and more about, kind of figuring out who I am and getting ready to actually, have a job and be a business owner.
Sure. So, I mean, I'm on your website now and I'm just reading. I mean, you've been recognized 4 times as a top 40 accountant under 40 globally. I mean, don't be so modest, man. You're definitely doing some things correct. And, but I'd really like, you touched on the book a little bit, but dive deeper into that and just tell me, like, why should somebody buy the book? What's it going to teach them, help them with?
I think, well, my observation is that as a small business owner, we go through so much pain. There's these two tyrants, scrutiny and expectations. You have the people who you love the most, who are often giving you the most amount of criticism, scrutiny.
Yeah,
Are you ready?
True.
You know what you're doing? Oh, why is this one going to work? And their intention is pure, oftentimes, more often than not, I believe. But you're faced with all that scrutiny. And then once you start to have results, then people go like, well, of course you would have success. Of course you would. You're like, weren't you the same person who was scrutinizing me? And now when I have some successful moment, or successful from their perspective, it's you get the like, well, of course. And the expectations continue. So these two tyrants, scrutiny and expectations. And then there's all the internal stuff that we're dealing with,
Hmm.
guilt cycles that we go through, and going back and forth between maybe a lot of chaos to a lot of rigidity of back and forth, right?
Right.
That can make us very exploitable. And what I mean by that is that because we are often living in so much pain and trying to prove it to all those people who are giving us the scrutiny and expectations, trying to prove it to ourselves. If we don't have the right tools in place and really understand the patterns of what leads to long-term success, we end up falling victim to the one hack, the one step, the one secret, right? I have so many,
Yeah.
thousands of conversations with business owners through my accounting firm, and so I hear the same points about like, I'm just one step away. It's like, this is going to be my year. And that that sort of notion uh, results in many of us, again, being very exploitable, falling victim to buying these kind of get rich quick type schemes.
Hmm.
And so we need to have a better uh, set of tools for making decisions so that our business actually serves us and getting closer to what we want. And so that's kind of what the book Rigging the Game is about, is how to engineer luck and get what you want on your terms without compromise.
Oh, that's great. It's funny, Dan, you said that, because when you go online anymore, there's 10 million different scammy things that, entrepreneurs or business owners can, oh, look, do you want to get 5,000 leads in 2 days, and people buy into this stuff.
They do.
So yeah, so it's
Yeah.
nice to have someone out there that's kind of like, hey, this is the truth, and you need to follow this.
Yeah, you can sort of spot the false narratives when you go, well, how does this really work in the extreme? So you're telling me, for example, that I'm only going to be successful if I do a Facebook Live every day. I'm only going to be successful. So buy
Hmm.
my program on how to teach you how to do Facebook Live. Okay, I'm only going to be successful if I do this. And then you're like, okay, let me think about that in the extremes. How many Facebook Lives has most of the billionaires in the world done? Well, maybe Mark Zuckerberg has done a couple Facebook Lives because he started
Yeah, right,
Facebook.
right.
All right. So like, no, you can be successful and get the results you want many different ways. That's one strategy. And if that works for you, if that's leaning into your strengths, absolutely do it. But but if you have other strengths, lean into those.
Yeah.
It's cliche. It sounds simple, but it's not easy because again, we're in so much pain looking for the like next thing that's going to get me there.
Sure. And I mean, I would say, me being a business coach and an entrepreneur pretty much all my life, it's when you get into that zone that you're talking about, a lot of people are, burnout hits at some point. You're just like, I can't do this anymore. Like, I'm that one, like you talked about, you're one step away. This is going to be my month or my year. And it
Mhm.
never happens. And after a while, that's why I think a lot of times businesses
Yep.
fail. They just like fold it up.
Yeah, and for the listeners, what I want to say to everyone is that it's biologically wired into you. So if you listen to, say, like Dr. Andrew Huberman, he talks about how dopamine is the molecule of more. If you read a book like Thinking Fast and Slow, they talk about system one, system two. System one is the fast part of our brain. It's wired with a bunch of biases. Study someone like Dr. Jeff Spencer. He talks about human mindset and champion mind, all the same versions of the same thing. Ultimately, we're wired by default to chase more clients, more revenue, do more stuff. If you think back to being hunter gatherer, like it makes sense. You got to, whenever there's an
Yeah.
opportunity there, you got to take it. The danger, though, is that oftentimes, in pursuit of more, we put in too much, which we're having to put in maximum effort, and we take on maximum risk. And so then we're not left with any options.
Yeah. True.
And so we create this narrative where we're always on the hamster wheel. And if it's okay with you, I'll share one simple thing. Often I'm in a role of kind of CFO for clients.
Sure.
One one thing that I do immediately when I get access to someone's books, I go, let me look at the last 3 years of profits by month. And I can tell you, having done this, I don't even know how many times at this point, that there's almost always a pattern of the same 3 or 4 months out of the year where clients are losing money.
Mm.
And my mentality is how do we remove downside? How do I stop losses? If I can eliminate downside, then I'm only left with upside. It's a different orientation. Rather than always chasing upside, I'm like, let me get rid of all the bad stuff, because then I only have good stuff. So I go, okay, how can I just turn these negative months to zero? So, and what ends up happening when I do the math for clients, I go, hey, if these 3 months were just break even, you'd have twice as much cash right now. You lose so much in these 3 months that you eat away at all the success you've had the rest of the year.
Mm-hmm.
How do we just turn those to zeros? And you start examining the root cause, and it ends up being that almost always these are patterns that they're chasing. They have some successful months, and then they try and scale, and they start overspending, and then they dig a ditch where now they have these lost months because they're trying to grow. They haven't really kind of done the root cause analysis. So I just challenge everyone who's listening, who's trying to build a business, try to change your orientation. How can I turn these losses to zeros? Rather than always, how can I double my revenue?
Yeah, that's great advice. I mean, that's great. That's great mindset training as well. Like because I think like humans, we concentrate on those negatives, right? So
Yeah,
we see those 3 months of just negative and go, oh, that's terrible. But you don't look at the rest of the picture. And so, I mean, it's nice that you said that, Dan, because I think people need to hear that for sure.
Yeah, your business exists to serve you. That's my belief, and getting you closer to what you want.
Yeah.
And oftentimes what people want is more time and more energy. And so we're not too far away from people doing New Year's resolutions. And I was talking to a lot of folks, asked them, hey, what is your New Year's resolution? And almost everyone had some version of be more disciplined.
Mm.
Okay. And I go, okay, well, how are you going to be more disciplined? Right. And they're like, well, I'm just going to be more disciplined. You're like, okay, so to be more disciplined, you're going to have more discipline. Like, yeah, I guess so. Or they're like, I want to have more restraint. You're like, so how are you going to have more restraint? You're like, by being more restrained. Like,
Yeah.
okay. So can you see how
Yeah.
that might be problematic? And they're like, okay, well, I don't know what to do. It's like, well, how about stop putting yourself in positions where you always have to be so disciplined? So how about instead of trying to be more disciplined, you try to be less impulsive? How would that change your life? How much more time and energy would you have? Right? You get home at the end of the day. Many people are like, hey, you know what I really want? I want more time with my kids. And then COVID happened, and they're like, oh, hold on. Maybe I don't want more time with my kids. I want energy. I want to be more present. Okay. I want to be more present. Totally makes sense. How do you actually do that? Well, we need more. We got to change our patterns over the course of the day so that when we get home, we can actually pay attention, right? So, or be present. And so, how do I actually do that? I need to remove the bad things that are taking all the energy from me over the course of the day so that I have more left over. What people typically try to do is just like, well, let me just try to have more energy. Let me wake up earlier, exercise more, do all those sort of things. That's great. Not discouraging that. But they're not looking at the things that are actually causing them to have less energy, causing them to lose money, let's eliminate those. That's harder to do because we're wired for more, but it's actually easier to implement.
Yeah. Yeah. So if you're just tuning in, talking with Dan Nicholson from Rigging the Game, and a lot of different things, but he's I noticed that you're a U.S. Today and Wall Street Journal best-selling author, right? That's
I
great
am.
job, man.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, so I would definitely, go to this website, riggingthegame.com, and check that out. I saw the book is on Amazon as well, so you could grab that on Amazon. But you also do a podcast, is that right? Are you
I do. Yeah. I'm not very
okay?
creative, so it's also called Rigging the Game.
Hey, it's called
So,
branding, right? You have to have that.
yeah. Yeah.
So talk to me about we've talked about the book, we talked about rigging the game, but I want you to talk to me a little bit about um, your accounting firm. I mean, do you
Yeah.
tell me a little bit about what clientele you have, what sort of things you guys do there?
Yeah. So a lot of what I have built into Rigging the Game and other businesses is the same frameworks that we apply to our accounting firm clients.
Mm-hmm.
So there's this quote that I love from this guy, W. Edward Demings, and he says, "Every system is perfectly designed for the results it gets." So if you don't like the results, then you got three choices. You can either be a victim and just be upset about it. You can try and change the system, or you can try to change your behavior. Now I share that because in the accounting firm, a lot of what we do is we uh, help people re-engineer their cash flows, and a big part of that is minimizing their tax exposure.
Mm.
And most people know, hey, small business owners pay the highest average tax rate. Big corporations, sophisticated investors pay the least amount in tax by a significant difference on a percentage basis. And some people get upset about it.
Right.
Right? They choose that option of, I'm just going to be angry about it. This isn't fair. Okay. And that may be true, depending on your own political beliefs. That may be true. I choose to go, well, can we change the system or can we change our behavior? Well, can't really change the tax code. Well, it turns out that if you want to pay less in tax, you just behave more like a big corporation or sophisticated investor. A lot of the strategies are out there, public information, because they're in court cases and IRS audit manuals.
Mm-hmm.
And so what we do for folks in re-engineering their cash flow, using tax as an example, is based off your goals and how your business operates currently. How do we modify your behavior slightly so that you get these benefits that the big corporations are and sophisticated investors are accessing? Because the tax code is constantly changing, and the sophisticated investors, big corporations, they're constantly modifying things so that they always pay the same rate.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, if you graph the average tax rate paid over the last 100 years by all taxpayers, it's a flat line. It's basically the same. Even though we've had higher rates and lower rates. In fact, we've had significantly higher rates, still roughly the average, because those who have a lot at stake, they modify their behavior to take advantage of the new incentives. The typical small business owner, they're with a CPA who I call an archaeologist, who just digs up the past. They're always just digging up the past. They see this year, they're talking about last year. Maybe they're asking you a question about 18 months ago. That's a system that's designed that's going to guarantee you're always paying the maximum rate. We got to move towards being future focused, modifying our behavior, capturing these new incentives. And so once you understand that every system is perfectly designed, and you go, can I change the system? Can I change or do I need to change my behavior?
Mm-hmm.
Then you can rig the game in almost every domain. So you go, tax code, how's the system work? Okay, how do I change my behavior? Okay, cool. Now I can pay less in tax. I want to have a Wall Street Journal, USA Today bestseller. How does that system work? Okay. Can I change the system? No, I don't own USA Today or Amazon. How do I need to modify my behavior in marketing this book to get the outcome that I want? Being healthier, how do I do that? Well, I got to probably modify my behavior. So it ends up being that these systems of thought process work in, I haven't found a domain that it doesn't work.
Yeah, that's great. So I like when you were talking about the CPAs or whoever,
Yeah.
that's just like I don't remember what you called them, but
Archaeologist.
yeah, it's very familiar to me. So let me put it that way.
Hmm.
So
Yeah, you probably see it.
yeah. So in my own business, actually. So anyway, so tell me a bit about your podcast and where can people go check it out at?
Yeah, so we have links to the podcast at Rigging the Game, and it's up on pretty much anywhere where you can find a podcast.
Okay.
And the first season was me kind of interviewing some mentors and friends. The second season is talking to uh, students of mine. So we have a certification program called the Certified Certainty Advisor, and they go through this kind of in a cohort with 20 others. They learn this whole methodology on how to rig the game, basically, and they become certified. And there's a bunch of kind of benefits and things that come from that. And so season 2 is some of my students coming on and talking about how they've applied these principles and way of thinking to re-engineer their businesses to get the life that they want. So they share a strategy, which are also in the book as well. They'll share a principle, strategy, and then how they've implemented it and what that outcome has been for their life.
Wow.
So it's pretty cool.
You are busy.
Yeah, very rewarding to see the ways that students' lives have changed and the way that they've kind of collectively come together within their cohorts.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't imagine this happening when we first created it, but a lot of them have sort of become like their closest set of friends because and the reason they say that is the overarching message in Rigging the Game and in our certification program is play your game, lean into your strengths. If you really study extraordinary leaders, they are all their unique self. When you're a billionaire, they call you eccentric, but before you were the eccentric billionaire, people called you a weirdo. And many of us feel like the weirdo.
Yeah.
Right? We're running this business, and the rest of our friends are like, I don't even. It's 5 o'clock. Why are you still working? Like, it's Saturday. Why are you working? Like, hey, aren't you caught up on these TV shows and so on and so forth? They're like, no, my hobby is business right now. And so we get labeled the weirdo, and you need to play to that. You need to play to that strength, who you are, play your game. And so we're teaching people to not conform, to in fact unlearn the things that you've been taught, because it is what's holding you back. This sense of like, I've got to conform, and there's only one way to work in business. It's almost silly to say it out loud, but there's so many people who are peddling this one way. And so they're all from different industries. We don't typically have in a cohort of 20 anyone in the same industry, but they come together, and they're all so different. But it's the only place that they have where they're allowed to be truly different and not have to justify it or explain it. So it's a ton of fun. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's great. That's really cool. So I always try to touch on, careers in general here, because we do have, our audiences, some people that are thinking about being an entrepreneur or maybe getting into accounting. So what would you give a piece of advice that somebody that's maybe looking to maybe jump into what you do? Is there, what would you tell somebody like that?
To look, if they're looking to toward being an accountant specifically, or towards being an entrepreneur?
Yeah, accountant.
So in the last 2 years or so, 300,000 accountants have left the U.S. market.
Wow.
300,000. And that's going to be that's a trend that we've seen coming for a long time. I've been saying for the last almost 15 years, in the next 5 to 7 years, 75% of CPAs are going to retire. And that just kept getting pushed out a little bit as CPAs were working older, in their 70s and 80s. COVID then accelerated that. Like many industries, they decided, okay, now's the time. I'm going close up my practice or I'm going to retire. So there is a massive shortage of skilled workers in the accounting space. Um, and so there's a huge opportunity if that's a career path that you're interested in. AI is changing the nature of the work like it is in so many industries,
Hmm.
but it's changing it for the good. That's my bias in the sense that it's going to force accountants to be more of that architect than the archaeologist. The algorithms are going to be able to do a lot of the initial pass of recording transactions, entering stuff into software. And so it's really do you understand your client's goals?
Yeah.
Are you showing them how to close the gap? Are you really helping them re-engineer their cash flow so their business serves them? And so, yeah, you know the numbers, but you're more of a advisor, or you're called upon now to truly be an advisor. And it just so happens your expertise is the debits and credits and the tax law, but it's just applying that to uh, their business in, again, helping serve them.
Yeah.
So lots of opportunity.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's great. Great to hear that. I didn't know that big a number that many people have left that industry. So you mentioned AI, and it's such a hot thing right now. Are
Mhm.
you guys using AI in your firm currently?
We are, we are, and what we use it for is the initial draft.
Okay.
Back to sort of playing your game, AI is just further accelerating the need for distinction and really leaning into your unique self. This is my belief.
Hmm.
Uh, and so never has there been a time where you being your unique self has been more important. I stumbled to
Yeah.
get those words out of my mouth, but it's really important to play your game, because that initial draft of an email, maybe that initial pass on bookkeeping, can be automated. It's then how you take that information and make it distinct and apply kind of your unique perspective on stuff. That is where all the power is. So yeah,
Hmm.
we'll use AI to do the initial draft for client communication, maybe blog posts, aid in some transaction entry. We're just starting to explore that. There's some cool things we can do with like summarizing meeting notes and putting that into a Slack channel, summarizing a business's
Hmm.
um, results over the last week as an initial draft. But they're all initial drafts, and then we have to add in our unique perspective.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, thanks for sharing. I was just curious because every interview I do now, it seems that AI comes up, in one way or another. So I'm always curious how people are utilizing it. Um, so, what's one thing in your business or venture you didn't expect? Like you go, wow, I never knew I was going to be doing this, or that I'd have to do this or whatever.
I had this false narrative that I could just outwork everyone. And I sort of I think a lot of people go into business and they think, as long as I keep working at this, cash flow or money is just going to keep going up.
Yeah.
Maybe they're not that explicit about it, but there's this underlying belief, especially in American culture, that hard work is kind of ingrained in us. You work hard, and you reap what was sown. Like, put in the effort. Early bird gets the worm. All these sort of things. And so I always had this notion, like, I'm just going to work harder than anyone else,
Hmm.
and always do the right thing. And the result of that is going to be success in business. And there's some truth to that. That effort, working hard is important. Uh, but again, I've had to unlearn a lot of this type of stuff, because if you're always, uh, if you study someone like Nassim Nicholas Taleb in his book Anti-Fragile, Black Swan, etc., he talks about how luck is such a he used the word luck. Um, that there's these sort of 2 or 3 inflection points in your life where if you're able to capitalize on it, that's where there's all the significant upside that happens.
Hmm.
And so what I've had to sort of realize is a lot of times instead of doing something when I'm not clear, I should just go for a walk or I should just take a nap. Because really, what I need to do is have options open so that when the real home run opportunity presents itself, I have the resources to capitalize on it. And if my
Yeah.
bandwidth is always so constrained by uh, a massively packed schedule, and I'm working 7 days a week, and I'm hustling, and I'm constantly tired, then I'm not able to capitalize on those actual couple of home run opportunities. So that's why I encourage people, we got to change our orientation from maximum effort, maximum risk to least amount of effort given all the options, least amount of risk given all the options, so that when the real home run things show up, you're available. You can capitalize on it.
Yeah. No, that's great. I mean, it's hard to do, right? As an entrepreneur, you just think like, oh, I got to outwork everybody and I got to keep going, keep going, keep going. And sometimes you're so right. Just go take a walk and come back, and it's like, oh, there, my mind cleared. I get it now. So,
Yeah.
so yeah, definitely agree with you there. And that may be the next question I was going to ask you is, do you have a favorite productivity hack that you would recommend for entrepreneurs, or is that the hack itself?
I have this filter, which is a thing worth doing. Many people go, well, it's got to be a hell yes or a no. And I think that's a nice starting point, but we're so subject to biases that on any given day, we might say hell yes. And then the next day be like, that's a no. We're so clouded by day to day.
Right.
There's been, and so I have this, is it going to get me closer to what I want? Closer versus more. So will this initial filter, will this decision get me closer to what I want? Yes or no? Well, that requires me to be clear on what I'm trying to achieve. What is my
Mm-hmm.
number one overall priority? That could be time, something time related, influence related, money, energy, reputation, etc. What am I really trying to get closer to? Number one priority. If I'm not clear on what the number one priority is, or if I'm not clear on the answer, then I stop and I go on a walk or I take a nap, come back. Am I clear? Do I know what to do? Not sure. Do I have enough data? Because oftentimes we think we're data driven, but we don't really have any data. I don't know. This is completely speculative. I'm making a bet. I don't know.
Right.
So then I'm not sure if this will get me closer or not. I don't really have any data to support my decision. So then my next thing that I do is, what is the smallest step that I can take to get me some data to inform my decision? Because to me, the biggest risk in life outside of death is not living the life that you want. And if I'm
Mm-hmm.
grabbing onto things that are getting me further away, then I'm sort of choosing a life of misery, or at least to not live in total fulfillment. So what's the smallest step that I can take to get some data? Sometimes that's a Facebook post. Hey, if I did this thing, would you be interested? Sometimes
Yeah.
it's an email. Sometimes it's a phone call. But what I do is I set a rule in advance. So I'm going to take this step and I need at least 20 people to respond, or I need at least some outcome that I've predetermined to
Mm-hmm.
happen. Because what I know is, back to biases, we're so subject to anchoring bias, loss aversion, mental accounting bias, et cetera, that if I don't set the rules in advance, just even 1 or 2 people responding is going to be enough for me to go like, well, people want this, I should do it. So I got to set the terms in advance. So just to sort of like summarize, is this action going to get me closer to what I want? Yes or no? If I don't know, I'm going to take a walk or a nap. If I come back, I got the answer and I have some data, I make the informed decision. Usually I still don't have any data. So I go, what is the smallest step I can take to get me the data I need to inform my next action? And I set the rules in advance, so I'm not negotiating with myself. that has eliminated like 80% of the things that I would have done in the past that would have sucked up all my bandwidth and taking me out of the game to be able to actually capitalize on the home run opportunities that have come up.
Yeah, that's great advice. Thank you for sharing that. This is kind of an interesting question because you're an author yourself. You're a really great author of Rigging the Game. But do you have other books that you would recommend for people to dive into for, entrepreneurs is really what I'm thinking.
One of my favorite books is this one right here, How to Fly a Horse. You read How to Fly a Horse?
I have not.
We have this notion that
write that down.
Creativity that's completely false. And this author, Kevin Ashton, who's also the inventor of the Internet of Things, so he himself is an incredibly creative and accomplished person. He completely dispels the myth around creativity, which is that we think that there's the stroke of genius, like Doc Brown in Back to the Future. He hits his head and he comes up with the flux capacitor. I'm dating myself. Yes, I'm in my 40s. We think it happens in a moment, like you just wake up and you write the amazing song or you come up with this revolutionary idea in this flash. But in actuality, it's the sum total of all of the decisions and experiences that you've had up to that moment. In other words, creativity really is a process. And therefore, if it's a process, then all of us have the ability to be creative. And so many of us are limiting ourselves in our jobs and our career path because we think, I'm not creative. Many people who want to do accounting, they're like, I'm not creative. I'm boring. Society has told us that we're the butt of many jokes. But in fact, creativity is a process. And if you opt into that, doesn't mean you're going to come up with the flux capacitor or write the next great, amazing song. But there's something in you that you don't know exists yet. And you got to keep working toward it.
Yeah, well, that's great. So How to Fly a Horse. I'm gonna have to look that one up. That's really cool. So I always ask this question, and sometimes people go, I have no idea, but is there a question you wish I would have asked you during this interview that I haven't asked you? Something you want to talk about?
What question do I wish that you would have asked?
And if there's none, that's fine too, Dan. I mean, that means I just did so great that you don't have any.
No, you did do a great job. Maybe around this concept of, I mentioned earlier, the solvable problem, and asked me to explain that in a little bit more detail.
Okay, well, go for it. Let's hear it.
Solvable problem. I built a tool called the Certainty app where you can do this for yourself, completely free to sign up and set up your own solvable problem if you want. All right. So
is the link on that same Rigging the Game?
Yeah, on either you can go to riggingthegame.com or certaintytools.com, and that'll take you to
up there.
All the different things I've got going on.
Okay.
Okay. So many of us have been told, start with why. And what is your why? Simon Sinek made that famous. And I think that's really nice, but it's a bit convenient because many of us are like, I don't know what my why is. And then that can lead to what does that mean to me about me if I don't even know what my why is? And how do I figure out my why if I don't know what it is? So it's good in spirit, but it's problematic or difficult, I think, in practice for many people to execute. And so often we might build out a vision board. I've done vision boards, seen many vision boards done. What ends up happening is people get a huge dopamine rush. And then maybe for the next week or two, they do a bunch of stuff. Like they get up earlier, they start working out, they try to accomplish everything on that vision board in the next year or two. And then you check in with them 2 weeks later and you're like, how's that going? It's like, yeah, I haven't made any progress. And that's because the vision board is not a solvable problem. It does not actually tell you what it's going to take for you to accomplish those goals or items you put up on your board. You want the six-pack abs? Okay, well, there's a cost to that. Getting a that we need to account for. Like maybe you need to hire a trainer. Maybe you need to take on a few less clients so that you have the energy to work out this hour a day.
Mm-hmm.
We just assume I'll just get up earlier. Well, there's no evidence to suggest you've ever been able to get up earlier. Now all of a sudden you're going to get up earlier 6 days a week. Like you're designing a system from the beginning that requires you to operate at your best at all times. So there's a cost to the six-pack abs. There's the cost to being the ideal parent. There's the, of course, cost for the nice house or the second home or the Lambo or the private island or whatever it is that you want.
Mm-hmm.
So what I suggest to folks is we take the things that we want and we put a date to when we want to achieve it by and a dollar value. And then we put in how much we have in current resources, your savings accounts, and how much money you're making each month. And it's going to calculate for you how much more you need to make in order to live that life, fund all of those priorities and the timelines that you've set. Now we have a solvable problem. And maybe that number is you need to make 10 grand more per month. And if you could make 10 grand more per month, you could achieve everything that you've listed out in the timeline that you've identified. And so the tendency would be to go like, okay, now I need to go make 10 grand more a month. But what if in your current financials, you had $10,000 worth of bets that you're making that don't have a demonstratable return, that you could just cut those expenses and reallocate them to your solvable problem? Now you don't have to do more, and you just set yourself on the path where you're going to get everything that you said that you want. And so basically the solvable problem is creating a GPS for your finances, for your vision board, and then using that as a tool to measure, are the decisions I'm making actually getting me closer or further away? And then causing you to stop and go, how could I get there faster without having to do more?
Okay. I like the GPS reference. That's good because like a vision board and goals, it's something I talk to business people about a lot, because I think what happens is, like you said, we do these things and then we don't reference them after a couple of weeks. We're like, oh yeah, I have goals. Like, but you don't have there's no GPS of how you're going to accomplish that. Right. I mean, I think that's
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
The risk is that you just go and do a bunch of stuff in chasing the vision board.
Mm-hmm.
And then 6 months later, you're in a worse position because you tried to scale, hire all these people in the name of funding all your goals, but actually you had the money already there. So you stepped over dollars to pick up pennies. Like the opportunity was already there. So we can actually kind of measure our progress towards that solvable problem.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And they can reference that or touch. Let me throw the website up again here. So
in my book, I have a section where I break down in much more detail how to create your solvable problem, and as well as a reference to the Certainty app, where you can set it up and you don't have to know all the math behind it. The last thing I'd want to say for those people who are running businesses, I originally created the solvable problem because I didn't want to be a commodity to my clients. I was speaking to this group of 300 other accountants, and everyone was asking me the same question, phrased slightly differently. And I realized all of us in here, we're commodities because we don't actually show how saving somebody money in taxes, how re-engineering their cash flow is contributing to them living the life that they want. And I believe that the essential question every client is asking themselves, every person is asking themselves, am I going to be okay? Am I going to be able to live the life that I want? And so if you're a finance person, you help them set up their solvable problem. You show them how much you save them in tax. You put that in. You're like, I just cut off 5 years from your solvable problem. If you're a copywriter, you help them set up their solvable problem. You help them grow their revenue and profits. You go, hey, you know what? This campaign that I just set up for you and this extra money, look how much time I cut off from you living the life that you want. You're, on and on and on. So you can go through every profession, and ultimately, if you're showing them the solvable problem, you can then show them how the work that you're doing is actually contributing to the life that they want. And that's someone I believe that's going to be much more irreplaceable in the future with AI,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because AI,
Yeah.
it can do the initial draft. It's us humans who are having that personal connection, really understanding the life that people want. How do I show you how your decisions and through the work I'm doing contributes to that life?
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that. So Dan, I appreciate your time. I want to just end it there. I think I've kept you long enough. I'm sure you got plenty to do today. So I would like to just tell everyone to make sure you're going to riggingthegame.com, grab Dan's book, and also all his links are on there. Go check out his podcast. And if you need some accounting help, he's definitely can help you there. But yeah, thank you, Dan, for joining me here, and I'm looking forward to. I'm going to grab the book too because I'm very interested in how you rig the game, and hopefully I can learn something there.
Oh, right on. I appreciate you having me on. This was fun.
No problem, Dan, and I'll make sure that all your contacts are in the description. So, folks, if you need to go to the video description, you can find all of Dan's contacts there. So,
awesome,
Dan. Have a great day. Thank you, sir.
you too.
All right, that was Dan from Rigging the Game. Make sure that you go support him. Obviously he's very knowledgeable about a lot of things because he's been in the middle of it, and that's the kind of people you want to talk to. That's the kind of book you want to read. People that actually have real life experience in business and in just life in general, really. I want to thank you guys for tuning in to the Biz Pulse, and I will catch you next time right here on the Biz Pulse. If you have, a topic that you're really, really wanting to hear, for me to talk about or bring someone on, please reach out. You can reach out anytime, anytime and any day, really. You can catch me at here. Just throw a comment on one of the videos, or, in the description, I'll have my contact info. And I think that's about it for me this week. Guys, take care. Stay working hard at growing your business, because that's freedom. Entrepreneurship equals freedom. Take care.